Thank you for coming today. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here. We've been really looking forward to this artist talk because I think our biggest question, or that of our visitors, is how Judy and Lilach arrived at working together and how their ideas coalesce. And what we'd like to do today is invite them to walk us through their exhibitions and kind of talk through what they were thinking, but also kind of having, with this overriding question in mind. It's been a real pleasure to be in the space. I do tell our artists that I think we're all spoiled that work here. We get to live in a space for 8 weeks with wonderful art, and then it changes, and then we get to do it again. And it feels different all the time, and it's always wonderful and enriching and very, very special. So for those of you that may not know our artists, this is Judith Roston Freilich and Lilach Schrag. And Judy, maybe we'll start with you, because I don't know, I just kind of thought since you're closer to the entrance, maybe
we're standing right here.
that everyone encounters first, so maybe that's kind of, I don't know.
Sounds good.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here. It's really, I have to make art every day to stay sane, but this is kind of the part that matters, is to try and connect with other people and see if, for my art, to see if you can find a place for yourselves in it. So I think this all began for me when I was very young. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and I had older brothers who didn't really want to play with me. So I was always in the corner of my bedroom with a stack of paper and crayons, and I spent hours there. And I think I never lost that. So I still need that time every day. Only now I have a studio I can do it in, which is very nice. So it's always been kind of what comes out of me and where I'm at. So it's a personal kind of journey that almost ends up being kind of like a journal. So I think we talked about walking around and looking at some of this stuff. So let's start here. I grew up in a family with a father who loved horticulture, so he was always taking me in walks in the garden to see his daylilies, and we would play bee and take the stamen and pistil from one to another to crossbreed the daylilies. And then we'd walk in his garden, and he'd have a pocket knife with him, and he'd cut up a kohlrabi and show me all these strange vegetables, and he would take a pear branch and put it on an apple tree, and so there was all kinds of interesting things going on. There were always pits from peaches and plums in our refrigerator that eventually turned into plums and peach trees. And then we would can the fruit and use it all winter. So we lived by the seasons, and I think that's always stuck with me. So as I'm talking, I want to remind you that this only gets even better if you have questions and you want to ask them. So feel free to just blurt it out or raise your hand. I'm good with it. So this particular drawing has a rose of Sharon right in the middle of it, and clearly it's not living, it's wilted. And I think that that's a big part of making art to me, is the whole cycle of life. So to me, a wilted rose of Sharon is just important and just as beautiful to me as one that's fresh and just bloomed. And then it's coming from someplace that's deep. And I think when I'm drawing, I feel that. I feel like I'm climbing into the drawing, and that I'm someplace deep inside myself. and then it often comes out. Sometimes those places that are deep aren't always easy places to be. But more than often they end up opening up. So I don't know if anybody's interested in the process of this drawing, but there's cracks in it, and that's done with crackle paint. And there's also textiles in it. The paper is sanded. So I begin with like acrylic paint all over the paper and then sand it off. And as I sand it off, more of what I'm thinking comes out. When I was a freshman in college, I was taking a design course, object design. And I was drawing a typewriter. This was like one of the first things I did when I was getting my degree. And as I was looking at this typewriter, the keys on it started coming alive in my head. Oh. And they were reacting with each other. And it freaked me out because I thought, oh no, what's going on inside my head? I mean, I wasn't on anything. It was like lunchtime. So I kept thinking to myself, I thought, well, what am I going to do? This is a whole other world. Am I going to live in two worlds my whole life? Or how do I bring them together? And I think the bottom line is that some of us do live in different worlds, and somehow we have to maneuver bringing them together. And I think that's what making art helps me do. So those typewriter keys, sort of at that time I just started drawing anything that was machinery, and all of it came alive and all of it was organic. And then eventually I didn't need the machinery parts anymore. And I just took it from living organic things that were in my head. And so that's where these all started coming from. Let's get this one a second and go to this one. So this one and these two over here, similar thought. That I sort of felt like I was walking in the paper and I got lost in it, and there were difficult times when there was anger in there, or frustration, or just dark sadness. But it all opened up eventually. There's plaster on the bottom of these, and there's a lot of sanding that happens as I'm doing it. And it's mostly done with my hands, because I don't know, I seem to need to really be in them. So the whole idea of painting and the idea of having to unscrew a paint tube and deal with a brush sounds overwhelming to me. I have trouble with the paint tubes and the tops. But I don't seem to have trouble just focusing in on smaller parts. So this one happened when I learned about myofascial release, which is when basically when muscles are tight. I hope nobody here is a physical therapist, because I don't really know what I'm talking about. But when the muscles are tight and eventually they massage them until they're let loose. And it seemed to fit in exactly the way I was thinking, that there's difficult times and then times when everything can open up. At some point, all of these organic things just kept getting deeper and deeper until we were well, we can start here. This is, so these are all textiles, and they started with hosta leaves. So they're fresh leaves that I sewed closed, and they're stuffed with wool roving. And then over the years, the hosta leaf dried up. And somebody looked at these and said that that the reason this is all happening is that I have textiles in my blood. I have a father who, with his brothers, actually his father, started a girdle factory. So I don't know if you all here know what a girdle is, but it's made out of fabric and textiles. And so in our house growing up, there were always sewing machines and thread and fabric, and we would go to fabric places just to feel it. So I think these are very similar to the drawings in that it's the part inside of us that's difficult. And sometimes we don't feel okay until we can get it out. And that's basically what these are about and what happened. So I don't know how you feel about when you look at them, but I'm much better after I did them. So I don't know, we talked about walking around and seeing. There's some drawings out here. The longer I worked with organic shapes and the more they kind of just infiltrated my thoughts, they ended up coming out like this. So what I realized was another artist actually looked at them and said, well, these are, he was a a microbiologist. And he said that these were mold. This was before I knew what I was doing. They just sort of came out. And he told me about digital microscopes where you can take a picture of anything and it ends up on your computer. So I grow mold in my refrigerator, which we all know is easy to do. In fact, I had 4 kids growing up, and I used to grow mold and see what kind of different mold was on different food. And he's told me not too long ago that when you give a 4th grader mold to take to school for show and tell, doesn't make him friends. So it's a big part of our lives, but there's something about it that, to me, the deeper I got into it, the scarier it got. And then when COVID started and climate change was in the forefront, I had a real difficult time figuring out how to deal with it. And so all of this was just getting deeper and deeper into it was the time of year where there were a lot of storms. There's 3 men in our family right now that are researching climate change. So it was very on top of what we've all been thinking about, as I'm sure it is for you too. But as I was working on these, the paper seemed so pristine and beautiful that it didn't seem to have anything to do with what I was drawing on it. So I took the paper and left it outside for a couple of months. And then when I brought it in, everything was right there in the paper. I almost felt like I was bringing the whole issue to the forefront. So it's sort of like this wasn't made up, it was in the paper and I just brought it out. So none of these things, people ask me what my art is, and I have a hard time labeling things, including being an artist, because it's just part of life. It reminds me of we heard a soprano giving a master class. She had a young man come up and sing, and he sang for her, and he stopped, and she said, okay, now do that again, and don't be an opera singer. So as far as labeling what I do, I have trouble doing that, because it's just part of who I am. And I don't think of anything that's in here as abstract, because it's all coming from something I see. So it's no more abstract than a realist who's painting something, and I mean, it's never not abstract, really. I have trouble with it. I have trouble thinking about that. Anyway, so from there, let's go back in here. I was thinking in a similar way, and then fortunately it opened up. So I could feel that I was bringing something that I'd already done with me. And I felt like I was living with it in a better place. And then, in this one, this happened right before Omicron, so we were almost there. We were feeling less devastated, I think, at the time, feeling like there was more hope. But then when Omicron came, in my mind, all I could see was this shimmering ball, and I couldn't make any sense out of any of it. Except that I knew that around this ball, things were unanswered and questionable, and so as far as me and science, I don't know science. All I can figure is that this is a springboard to learning more. Some of the sanding on this was done, I just took the paper outside. I have a very special relationship with a palm sander, so I do it on the sidewalk, and then I create some interesting paper. Anybody have any questions so far?
How about the string below? What did that mean for you?
The
string on the bottom of that painting?
Yeah, like filament. I don't know, what does it mean to anybody else? It happened, and it just comes, it's there. But most things that grow have some kind of filament, or I think that's where it comes from. Any other thoughts?
In a sense, like when you were talking about like after Omicron, there's still this like level of ambiguity. It could almost be like the loose threads that are still like there too. Like that kind of coincides with what it's hard to explain, but yeah.
I think that's a good thought. Any other thoughts? David, you have a thought?
So you're describing your process in a very personal manner. You're trying to articulate something that is difficult to articulate, so I understand that. But how important is it to you that the viewer feel or see any of the thoughts that you were experiencing or motivations while you were creating it?
That's interesting. So I remember I had a show once, and somebody I know walked in. She came up to me and said, "Judy, I can't look at this work. I have to go. This is making me sick." And I thought, that's awesome, because she was relating to it. So I think that it's important to me that people can relate to it on some level. But more important, I think, is that they can see that there's other ways to think about life, or what's under there that we don't know anything about, or to think about it for themselves. And so I think just like this might be a springboard, like the climate change kind of thing, maybe a springboard for science. I think what I hope is that the work can be a springboard for wherever anybody else is, and take you guys wherever you are, and see if you can make sense out of maybe not my work, but what's ever going on in your own life. So one of the gifts of showing in this amazing place is this wall. So we put these pods on here, and they were always meant as a community. And like any community, they all react differently to each other. So they look different and they react different. And there's always those people on the edge, or those things on the edge, any organic, whatever, on the edge of a cluster of things, like those two, where they're out of it, or they're not part of the group. So what I've always thought with this is to be able to have a community and respect the people that rather be on the edge of the group, or the organism that rather be on the edge of the group, and then together make all that work. What I didn't mention to you is that in everything, there's usually like a little place, and usually more than one, where something stops and there's something that's just random is there, like the glitter in that drawing. It made me stop, and I'm thinking, why is it there? And then there's other places in here, I don't know if you can see them, like the scavenger hunt. And I feel the same way about them. So the thinking is, I'll give it away. There's one in here. So it's a random kind of like, why is it in there? And that's an interesting thought to me. I know a very wise man that said to me once, when I would ask him questions like that, well, why does your nose grow in the middle of your face? And I think that sort of amazes me. So the question is, are things random? And if things are random, then do we make choices in our life and do it intentionally? Or are other living organisms, do they live their life with some intention? Or is it all random and so are we? I don't know. At the opening, some people came around and had a whole discussion about whether we make our lives work or whether everything is just random. So it felt good that this started a conversation like that. The installation over here was sort of reaction to COVID and climate change, and it's the same thing. That there's something underneath. There's a lot of stuff going on under there that we don't really understand. And I'd seen this documentary about trees and what's going on underneath the earth. And this is what came out. And interestingly enough, when I put these out, I found one of these inside. So it's all connected in a way that kind of tells a story of just where I've been and where I'm going. And the drawings, I think, in a way don't look finished because they're not. They're just moving on to another one. So the show, the way it is just where it's a moment in time. It's moving on already to something else. This particular installation, I think I would feel better if it was out the door, but I think I have that big head.
Do you mean not here?
No, I mean bigger, so that there were more of them going out the door.
So what material are you using for your pods and this?
When I did these pods, I love Eva Hess's work. But I didn't want to use any, what don't I want to use? Resin. So I developed this other way of doing it. So I took batting, cotton batting, and I sewed pillows. And then I stuffed them with fiberfill until they started bursting. And then I helped them burst a little more. And then when I took the fiberfill out, I lined them in plaster of Paris so that they would stay open. And that seems to be working okay. These are just Sculpey. It's just kids' polymer clay. $2.75 for 15 minutes, and it works great. There doesn't seem to be any odor from them, and what I like about them is that they're flexible, because I think if I had done them out of regular clay, they'd be brittle and they'd be breaking. So that's where they came from.
Did you choose the ginkgo leaf for any particular reason?
I don't think of them as leaves, I love ginkgo leaves.
Yeah.
That's right up my alley.
They're very similar, that's why.
Yeah. When I do them, I don't necessarily think of them as a plant thing. Sometimes they feel like bones or tissue to me. So the only thing that I do know about them in my head is that they slither and move and don't really care about where they're going. They're just going out and slithering on top of each other. Any other thoughts? Alex?
Would you mind talking about decisions on color, especially like the first, like
Color?
pink and lavender?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask.
Oh my God,
This is sort of like, in a way, it's my statement here. I was in my early 20s, and I was working at Landfall Press in Chicago. I don't know how many of you remember that. And at the time, they were having women's consciousness raising workshops. So I went to one that Judy Chicago was giving. And the first thing she said was that never to use pastel colors, especially pink. And I thought, oh no, I love pink. I can't be an artist. I'll just leave. So I left. So for the next 40 years, I wondered if I should be using pink or not, if pink should be part of my life. And I kept thinking, I don't know, in nature and in anatomy, and most things are pink. So I had a real tugs and pulls with this. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a show at the MCA, and Howardina Pindell was having a show there at that time. She's a wonderful black feminist artist. And she had these gigantic pink canvases. And I thought, that's pink. And there's nothing feminine about it. It was incredibly strong. So I went home and I said to my husband, I'm cured. Pink is fine. And I think that's around when that ended up getting finished, that drawing. So you should feel great for me because I'm freed up now to use any color I want. Does anybody else have any thoughts about color and pastels?
If I could just add a clarification to my question, and I think help your answer a little bit. It's like our minds kind of work in two ways, mainly verbal. But there's a whole other area of consciousness that can't be put into words. And people are not tuned into that enough, I think. And that's why they'll come into an exhibit like this. If they can't articulate verbally what's going on, they get frightened or confused, whatever. And a lot of artists try to find verbal ways to communicate what they're doing, even if the story that they're telling themselves does not connect in any way outside of them. The art does, but the verbal may not,
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I've had people after artist talks, actually. I've had people that didn't understand that the brain could work that way, and that kind of blows them away. Or I've even come into this gallery, and there have been people that have found out that I was the one that did this, and they were stuck, like especially in front of this drawing. And a younger man said to me, I can't pull myself away from this, and I don't know why I'm part of it like this. And I thought, well, that's what matters to me, that if somehow some little part of them speaks to another person, I think we need to realize that we're all so different. And I mean, it's really obvious these days in the world, but there's a part of each of us that we could relate to somehow. So I think that the way I'm feeling when I do this work is not too different than the way most people feel at different times in their lives. Different times come and go. And so in a way, to really be idealistic about it, if it can bring people together and show people that, yeah, you could find a piece of yourself, even if you're really different, coming from a totally different place. And yeah, I'm doing this with words, but
well, that's all we have.
That's what I was asked to do.
We don't have telepathy, so, I mean, ideally, art elevates consciousness, which is all aspects of the brain, not just language.
Right. Any other thoughts?
How are you moving forward with other work? Is it similar colors, or they're different but they're similar, or what is your, what are
It's
your thoughts about
it's all attached. One always comes from the other. And I think that's why it was difficult to get this to happen after those. So the next one is going to come out of this. And I can see how it can happen. And I think what will probably happen is that gradually more will be happening in a shape like this. Maybe. I think more will start happening on the edge, or I think it'll expand. Or I can see, I love leaving this paper outside these days. That one on the left, I think it's named May 24th. There was a storm in 2020, I think. And so just looking at it and remembering the 2 feet of water in our backyard, it's, I think that there'll be more, this will be more complicated maybe on the edges, or I can see adding segments to it. So there's different pieces of paper that either fit together or don't fit together at all. They grow and get, so it's not one piece that's 7 by 9 feet. There can be a lot of different ones that I can put together, and it makes it a lot easier to put it out.
Is there a reason you refer to them as drawings and not paintings?
Yeah, they really aren't paintings, because they were done with colored pencil and pastel and graphite. So the only paint there is really the dark stuff. I start with paint, and then there's dark paint, and then white. And then this pound sander I was telling you about. I usually sand through it and see what's underneath. This was started with a dark color, like the darkest dark is what this whole thing was.
Wow.
So there's a lot of layers on that and sanding through it. And when I got a master's in printmaking, I worked with Mitch Cohn, and I remember one day he said to me, I said to him, I can't get all these prints to come out the same way. And he said, Judy, if you would do the same thing each time you make a print, they would come out the same way. And I didn't think that sounded great, but the part I loved was inking the copper plates. So I think some of this, creating different textures, and then with my hand, I'm often just rubbing things into the texture, like the crackle paint over there. It feels really good to me to just rub paint into the texture. And then wipe it off, just like you're wiping down a copper plate. Anything else anybody has thoughts about?
Thank you, Judy.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to see all of you here in this cold but sunny afternoon. I would like to start with a few thank yous. I would like to thank Adrian Kochman, our curator here, Christina and Elena, who helped us install and took care of big details and small details with passion and with attention. Alex, our videographer, who is involved here, and it's just a really good thing, a huge privilege for us to show in this beautiful venue, in this wonderful place. I'm so impressed to see what the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art is doing. They are cultivating their unique culture, but at the same time building bridges with the community, with the larger community. And I guess Judy and I invited to show here is part of it. This is awesome to see, and I'm really happy to be part of it. I would like to thank my partner Judith for partnering with me. I really love her work. It's detailed and it's beautiful, and I like the way she approaches this impossible combination of beauty and decay together. I think together our work complement each other. We might be able to talk about it a little bit more later. I'll have to look at my notes at the beginning. It's a unique opportunity to show here, as I said, and in this close-knit community, I'm an immigrant myself. And when I look back, I realize that in every generation in my family, people get up and leave and move somewhere and build a life, keeping a lot of the old traditions together, but also adjusting and adapting new ways of living. My grandparents moved from Greece and Turkey and Poland and Algeria and Bulgaria, and my parents were born in Bulgaria and in France, and they moved to Israel, and I was born in Israel, and I grew up in Israel, and my 3 sons who are here were born in Jerusalem, and then we moved here, and my husband is from here, and his family is from here and from Europe, and we're all from all over the world, but we keep moving, and we in every generation, and keep adjusting. And for me, thinking about these beings, these creatures from mythology, from the Bible, from folk tales, looking at how they exist. They have this fantastical existence, but also connected to reality, and thinking about them and about my ability to live in different worlds at the same time brings me a lot of comfort and beauty. I grew up in a farming community in Israel of immigrants, and nature is my go-to playground. So when I go into the woods here and to the shores of Lake Michigan, I feel like it can happen to me. I can bump into creatures that are turning into other creatures and into vegetation. And I feel comfortable and comforted, and I hope that I managed to create in this space this feel of magic, of everything is possible. When I arranged this, when I started putting things here, and when we talked, Adrian and I, about arranging them, I was aiming for an experience for the viewers that is interactive. I wanted you to go into the circle and feel like you're one of these creatures, that you can walk around them, that you become one of them. It was important to me that you will be inclined to feel to feel involved, to discover things, to be surprised, to not totally feel like things are resolved. And I hope that this is what I achieved here. Even the columns here in this beautiful hall became part of my enchanted forest with vertical figures surrounding us. I would like to start talking about specific pieces and explain about my thinking and about my work process. So I want to start with these 2 pieces, the 2 diptychs that are kind of gatekeepers or welcoming committee to my area of the display. Well, I usually, when I prepare for an exhibit, I'm all energized and hyped and really excited to create new pieces that are specific for this new space that I'm going to show them. Most of the pieces in this exhibit are totally new, but these two diptychs are the oldest pieces in the show. I created like 4 years ago, it's not such a long time ago, but I created like 10 figures at the same size, different materials, and I thought about showing them in a circle where you can stand in the middle and be surrounded by them. So this is the first time that I'm showing the 2 drawings on the papers, and I'm coupling them with a fabric piece that I also call fabric drawings. This is, they're inspired by characters that come from Jewish folklore. This is Lilith, and this is Golem. So I'll tell a little bit about the different creatures that appear here, and so you can see where it's coming from. Lilith was a character that was invented by scholars that looked at the Bible and said, hey, first chapter in Genesis tells about the creation of man and woman in the image of God. And then immediately after, chapter 2 says God extracted a rib from Adam and created Eve. So which one is the right version? So they said, okay, so the real story is Adam and Lilith were created first as a couple and in the image of God. When Lilith thought that she is equal to Adam, she expected to be treated as one, and when she was not treated as equal, she grew wings and flew and left the Garden of Eden. You can only imagine the embarrassment for God, for Adam, for whoever, and so 3 angels were sent to retrieve her, and she refused, so she was cursed, and she was turned into a demon, a night demon, and she ended up being the mate of Satan. So I see her existence as tragic, and the way I chose to portray her here on the right is I chose for paper, for the base, I chose sewing patterns. I don't know if you used it in your life, but these are patterns that are supposed to guide you into making the perfect garment. If you're size 8, for example, you follow this line with F5-8, and you put together, and the garment is as it should be. Lilith here is painted with ink and charcoal on this fragile tissue paper, which is impossible. If you look closer, you'll see so many tears and damage. But she is rebellious. She is standing very quietly, but she's rebellious. She's not conforming with the way she should be, the way it should happen. The double head is actually a mistake. As I was drawing, I made a mistake and I made her too tall, so I lowered the head, and then I said, oh, let's keep it this way. And so you can see it as what I heard so many interpretations. It can be her alter ego, it can be Adam bossing her around, or Adam supporting her, or it can be her female, male identity aspects of the personality, which I heard today. The other side of it is made out of fabric. This is the kind of fabric I saw in people's living rooms as I was growing up in this immigrant community in Israel. They all came from Europe, and they lived a different life, followed a different vision, but they couldn't let go of this romantic notion of what is good taste, proper taste. So they have living rooms with this flowery, beautiful upholstery. I took the upholstery, I cut it into pieces, put them together to form a female figure. And then the idea at the beginning was to connect them with sewing, so it's solid, but as I looked at it, I decided to keep it with the sewing pins, as if it's about to fall apart at any second. It's emerging or it's falling apart, but this existence, this beautiful thing is very fragile. So coupling them together, I feel like I'm kind of offering a more layered approach or a more layered interpretation of Lilith. This is Golem. Golem is another folk tale that is also anchored in ancient Near East myth, and then it made its way to different cultures. The most famous story about the Golem is, in Hebrew it means unfinished matter. And the most famous story about the Golem is the Golem of Prague from the 16th century. It tells of a creature made out of mud that was brought to life by magic, by chanting or by writing words on his forehead. And his sole purpose was to protect. In that case, it was the Jewish community that was persecuted at that time in Prague. At the end, he was eliminated, and there are many different versions why, but the version that I really like is that he started developing feelings. He wanted to learn how to pray, he wanted to have a family, and when his creators saw that, they said, that's it, and they put him to sleep. They just erased a few of the letters, and he turned to mud again. The legend also says that he still exists somewhere in Prague, waiting to be brought back to life in case of need. So this coupling also, I hope, tell a story about the Golem becoming or disintegrating, what is the notion, how it's supposed to be and how it wants to be. So this too, I'm so happy about this opportunity to bring them back to this exhibit, older pieces, put them together in a way that I didn't think about them before, because I think that sometimes we make things that are really intentional and we really like them, and I often bring it out, but never exhibited it. And if we can bring things together and make adjustments to make them relevant for what we do today, that's best. So I'm really happy about this opportunity, and showing it here in this beautiful space gives me an opportunity to observe them. I'm still kind of skeptical about their existence. Do they belong together? What do they offer? But putting them together starts a dialogue, I hope, that at least for me is invigorating. Let's go to this big paintings over here. These two paintings I made like in the last half a year or so, 6 months. This came first. This is the second one. They're not tailored and after any specific tale, but they are describing this whirlpool of creatures and elements from nature, personifications of wind in the middle, that are all coming together. When I work on them, I usually start outside. I take big canvases and put them on the floor, on the ground, crunch them together and start spray painting them. Having in mind creation of light and shadow, feeling of depth. When I open it, it's always so much fun. It's like you're doing your tie-dye work. You always open it. You know that you're doing the swirly design or the lines, but when you open it, it's always a surprise. So when I open it, it looks in a little different than what I imagined. Then I incorporate all the creatures on top. They're layered, they're camouflaged, they are multiplied like that, as if they're moving. After incorporating all the elements, I have all these colors and all these shapes, and I felt a need to find a resolution how to put them together so they work. So I came up with this etching lines. We use etching lines in drawings traditionally and in etchings and printmakings. So I started using them to stitch pieces together. Stitching and everything is something that comes like into my mind often. So I use them, I made them in different directions. So most of them are in gold color, and they help me put things together, but also create this feeling of movement and unrest in the painting. So these two are newer. The next thing I want to talk about is the 3 videos here. These 3 videos were my depictions of water nymphs, of nymphs. Nymphs are creatures that live in nature and can transform in shape, and usually they're female and characters. So here I'm coming out of the water, going into the woods, trying to figure out what it's like, if I belong there, going back into the water at the end. There's another video of me called Sand Nymph, emerging from the sand, doing some kind of a dance that kind of develops into a full stretch of a body, and then coming back and going back into sand. Most of them just show this process of going in a direction and coming back. For me, showing my attempts to kind of look for comfort in nature, look like belonging in nature. The third one is me, or more like a creature, trying to belong, trying to be part of a dirt area with roots and everything. So when I was thinking about these showing these 3 videos here in the gallery, the option was to take this monitor and put it on against this white wall, and I didn't really like it. It felt really cold, especially in this forest environment that I was trying to portray. So I decided to take the 3 guns that I made, that I use in this video, these ones, and put them in the background, and then grow a forest and incorporate parts of found objects from nature, like roots and branches and stuff like that, feathers, and also objects that come from human habitat. That it's like some animals, some birds have this aesthetic sense where they collect stuff, shiny pieces, colorful little bottle caps, and they arrange them, usually to court or to attract the other gender. So I was thinking about that. It's me trying to create beauty with my environment, to collect, to do this. In this, when I was thinking about this idea for this gallery, this site-specific installation, I ran it by Adrienne when she came to visit my studio. And in my studio, this was hanging at the time. Because the studio is not so huge, I created a draft, a sketch of this installation in some corner, and all of a sudden they look like they can work together, they can connect. Like the painting can go into the installation and the video can go into the painting. And of course, Adrienne said, but you have twice as much of a size, like a wall. I said, fine, you did it. Elena helped me with it. She got really into it, and she got carried away, moving things and suggestions. And it's so nice to sometimes work with someone that has a fresh eye, that is not deep inside your process. It was really fun. Christina helped me. We moved this wall. We looked for the better way to show this and present it, to open it a little bit and make it connect. So this was a fun process. The last group of work that I want to show you is the circle around here. These are all creatures, so beings from Greek mythology, Jewish folklore, other stories. I wanted to create this circle of them. And when I started working on these stories, I realized that they're all female characters. And all of them had some kind of a tragic existence, but great powers. So I can tell you stories of some of them. This is Eve. Eve is considered the mother of all life, of all living things. So she's kind of like a pod, like a seed that can burst, that contains all the information. And on the other side also she's kind of, she has a spiky side to her, gold and precious, but also spiky. The pieces here are taken from old ritual fabrics that were used so many times in so many ways that got so worn out that they had to be discarded. So there's a line here. I use a lot of staples to connect things. In Lilith, somehow Lilith got out of the circle, but she's still part of this group. This Lilith, she's portrayed in Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel as a snake. When in the scene where Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, you can see a tree, and wrapped around the tree is a snake with the head of a beautiful woman, and that's Lilith. So she's like a serpent over there. This is Siren and Medusa from Greek mythology. Sirens were these women that had wings and beautiful voices and could play music with harps. And so this is represented by piano strings that a friend gave me as a big gift. And I found this piece and connected all the feathers, and it's the size of my arm. All the creatures here are about my size. They are about my height. I made the clothes, I made the pieces for them, and it's me, it's figurative, but it's my movement, my size. This is Medusa. Medusa was, in Greek mythology, one of the three golden sisters. She was the only mortal one. She was slain. She had a very tragic existence, history, but she had a head full of snakes and piercing eyes that if you look at them, you turn into stone. I found this amazing piece on the beach of Lake Michigan. It took it years to get distorted and try to grow again, and then probably it was moved by water, and then it had to change direction and shape. So there was not much I could do to this. It's just, I found it amazing. This is a deer woman. In Native American mythology, deer woman is a beautiful woman who likes to dance and has deer hoofs. So I gave her a wheel. It really works. And all the blue parts I connected to the original brown part. It looked like a deer, and deer woman was really beautiful and wonderful, but she had a soft spot for children and women, and when she noticed an abuse, she became lethal and really dangerous. That's her. And this is the Hans Christian Andersen's story from the 19th century about the White Swans. There's a story about 11 princes and brothers and one sister, and they had, unfortunately, the mother died, and the new queen was evil, so she cast a spell on them and turned them into swans. Swans by day and turning back into humans by night. And the sister figured out how she can release them from the spell, and the only way to do it was if she could create 11 garments made out of poisonous metal, right? Poisonous metal. If you touch it, this is a plant that is growing in this area as well. If you touch it, it's really painful. It's really burning. But she committed to do it, but she had to stay silent for the entire process. Otherwise, it would all be canceled. So she sat and she collected metal all the time, and she made all these garments. And because she was not talking and she couldn't explain herself, and people saw her sneaking at night into graveyards and places like that where nettle might grow unattended, they thought that she's a witch, and they decided to burn her on a stake. And on the way to the stake, 11 huge swans descended, and she was still working until the last minute, and then she threw the garments on them, and they immediately turned into 11 princes, and the only problem was that the youngest one, the last garment was not complete, so the young brother was left with a swan's wing. But this is her. This is representing this story. I started making it during COVID, and I started with the green part. I wanted it to look as if I keep working on it every day, collecting, bringing a new batch. Sometimes when you go in nature, you find green plants. Sometimes it's dried. Every day you find something else, and I incorporated all the pieces into this. There's some human hair in it, and the other part started incorporating, just like taking in all that I found in the house during the COVID time, pits and of peaches and dates and olives and banana peels and tangerine peels, all were sucked into this and were incorporated into this creation. And this is Wild Swans. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
How they connect with, or if they connect with?
Yeah, I have two pieces in the foyer. They're just heads, and there too are part animals, part plants. I'm not sure what they are. There's one that includes, and one of them is an old stone. So it has the head in there. So I really like to work with found materials, with materials that have history, that kind of absorbed special moments in people's life and bring other layers into the story. And these are, both of them are lilies in my head. The white one, you can see later, is like muted, like a head. It's a head, but it's muffled. There's fluffy stuff on it. You can't really express anything or eat anything with it. I connected a piece of decoration from my son's old house's curtains, And where I was working on it until the last night before we installed. I wasn't happy with it. I kept adding stuff and gluing and fastening it with binder clips, so until it catches. And then we decided to keep the binder clips because they look like this, like almost like a caterpillar, this creature, this dangerous stuff. So sometimes things happen in the process. The other one is the one with the stole has snake skin, which to me also represents Lilith. People think that she became the snake, the tempting snake. They're part of this three men. So
Are they the most recent work that you've done?
there are also two pieces that I made a while ago, and I added. It became more layered for me and more busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just an observation, the relationship between nature and human is organic and fluid. Nature's you present as kind of a benevolent force, comforting force, and yet the humans are in an ominous kind of state. So I don't know, do you think much about that as you think about the work you're creating?
I think that challenging events and conditions exist in nature too. We have a pandemic, there are floods and tornadoes and whatever. People are messy and it's in a way I'm thinking like you can always rely on nature, but we're part in nature too, and everything can fall apart. Nothing is for sure, nothing is forever, and I accept the beauty and the danger and the tragedy in all these parts of nature, human parts and plants and animals. Does it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's not one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's really complicated. Okay. Any questions? Then thank you very much. I'm still here if anybody wants to ask me questions, and thank you so much for coming.
I just wondered, briefly, maybe, Lilach and Judy, can you explain a little bit how you came to, partnering together, to exhibit, and what kinds of conversations you were having? Because your work complements.
Yes.
They're very complementary to each other, but I think it's also something that requires a lot of forethought to kind of relate to that nuance. No, you.
Okay. Judy and me are both from this area, living in this area, in the northern suburbs. We met at a critique group, and I've always liked Judy's work. And so nuanced and complex and beautiful. I made a proposal to exhibit here. Judy joined me, and that's how we ended up together.
I think you thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, we did. No, we did. We saw, what was interesting is that we thought of it before you proposed.
No kidding.
Uh-huh.
That would have been nice to know, wouldn't it?
I thought if you go back to your emails, maybe it's somewhere embedded. I don't know. It's from that time, but yeah.
It was meant to be.
No, it was a conversation at the meeting. actually, before, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's nice to hear.
yeah, and everyone, oh, I get it. Like they just was, yeah.
I think that Lilach and I, that were very different, which became more and more apparent as the days went on. And I think it's sort of interesting that Lilach has been all over the world, and I'm living in a house that's 3 blocks from where I moved in when I was 6 months old.
Oh
So
my
it's kind of, I think we've enjoyed the difference and seeing where we're at with that. And I think what I love about Lilach's work is that she just dives in and clearly has no fear. And I think that when I put a piece of paper up on the wall, I just step in and attack it. And I think that in that respect, we start to work in the same way. And I think that looseness of just letting it happen feels good. And I think there's some warmth to it, the naturally, things that are natural. And when you come into this space, in spite of what's happening in the world right now, this is probably the warmest space I have ever been part of. The people are warm, the whole mission of the community is warm and grounded and beautiful, and I think it fits how we feel about things in life and tradition. I think tradition is important to Lilach and I, and it certainly is. This place is steeped in it, and it feels wonderful and privileged to be here. So I think, I don't know, we do belong together somehow.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think maybe, I mean, and you're kind of articulate, maybe it has to do with staying with your organic self, or a sense of kind of
Right.
maybe self-realization or so. I mean, that.
To have it be who you are and
Yeah.
not a label. That
Right, right.
I don't think we think of each other as artists so much as what we are here to do.
Right.
What comes out is who we are. And that's what this place is.
It is, yeah, it does, yeah, I understand that.
So thanks.
You're welcome, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the freedom that you gave us
You're welcome.
to work together and figure out how we show things.
You're welcome.
Very gentle guidance.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thank